Thanks for checking out SYMFONI on YouTube. Please be sure to subscribe and like our videos for updates.
Very well. Very well. All right. We shall be discussing the NGO regulation bill with you, but let's start first with what your thoughts are on some of the resolutions made by the Southern governors, especially an aspect of it that touches on the consolidation of democracy and the electoral process in the country. And they've come out openly to say that the removal of the clause on electronic transmission of results in election is wrong. And they've rejected it, demanded that it be replaced. Your thoughts on that?
I've got nothing useful to add to what they said. And, you know, in the segment that you just transitioned from, you were speaking with Samson Itodo and with Lanre Arugudade on that issue. And I really can't add anything more to what they've said. I'm not going to try to you know, I think the point has been made that needs to be made, and no one who wishes the country well, actually, or wishes Nigeria's democratic experiment well, would support the idea embodied in the in that particular amendment. And my hope is that the National Assembly would do the right thing. But then the reality is, they don't have a habit of doing the right thing.
It's interesting because there's been quite some very controversial legislations that have come up from the National Assembly. Last week, it was the PIB, which has been roundly rejected by a lot of Nigerians, especially from the southern part of the country. And there are a couple of controversial bills as well. The media regulation bills, the Press Council Amendment Act, and of course the NBC Amendment Bill. But there's also a particular one that you find very nauseating, and which is the NGO regulation bill. Talk to us about that. What have been your findings and the details of the bill pending before the National Assembly? And what dangers does that portend for Nigeria's democracy and the civic space?
Well, I don't know. We could spend an entire day, and there could be multiple PhD theses on the efforts on how the current session of the National Assembly has conducted the business of the people, or in fact on the legislative and parliamentary misadventures that have characterized this current session. You've spoken about the PIB, for instance, and several of the peregrinations, the parliamentary peregrinations, I like to call them, that they've introduced. The idea that oil-producing states extends to people who have, or oil-producing communities, for instance, extends to communities that host pipelines. And so you lay a pipeline from Lagos, from, say, Rivers to Kaduna Refinery. Every community along that route now is an oil-producing community. And so the profits of the oil-producing companies or the exploration companies will have 30%, I believe, will now have to be laid out to service all of these communities. The terrible thing about this whole thing is that we're having this conversation at a time of global energy transition, right? So in our lifetimes, in the lifetimes of the three of us on this screen, the likelihood is that hydrocarbons are going to cease to be the mainstay of global energy consumption and will cease to be the mainstay of Nigeria's economy. Unless we choose, or God chooses to transition us a lot earlier. In another 20, 25 years, basically, we're talking about this happening. And this PIB does not in any way engage with the challenge of energy transition. It's behaving as if oil is going to be with us forever. But you're talking about the NGO bill, or you're interested in NGO regulation. The fact is that I think we've gone beyond NGO regulation. Okay, the government has been the APC, I'm not going to say government, the APC as a party, since it got into power in 2015, having been propelled by civic energy, decided that its enemy was Nigerian civic communities, and so decided to start decapitating whatever it could lay hands on. First, it toxified the digital space, right? By employing trolls who go there to abuse anybody and everybody and dismiss anything and everything as fake and as manufactured, and everybody is a hater and all of that. And people like Nasir El-Rufai, by the way, were the people who toxified Nigeria's digital space. The kinds of things that El-Rufai tweeted before he got into power as governor, and the kinds of things he has tweeted since he has been in power as governor, are not things anyone should be discussing. But here we are. They are the people in power. And because they are in power, they think they can do anything. So they've toxified Nigeria's digital space. Now, they want to toxify, and they wanted to go further and toxify Nigeria's analog space, the organizing space that citizens have. And so they want to decapitate NGOs, they want to decapitate the media, they want to, so I don't want to discuss one set of ideas, because they have tried over 3 times to introduce NGO regulation in different ways. They've all failed. What I'm more interested in is the assault, methodical assault on all elements of Nigeria's civic space.
What could the government actually be afraid of?
Themselves. Their failure of record. And let's be clear, this is my personal view. The PDP has failed as an opposition. All right? But look, democracy requires an opposition that is committed. And PDP is not a committed opposition. It lacks ideas. It lacks energy. It lacks passion. The APC has failed as a party of government because they are behaving as if they are opposition. And PDP has failed as a party of opposition, behaving with the cavalier attitude of a party in government. That is the crisis of Nigerian democracy summarized there for you. Sadly, the APC government does not have a lot to ride on. And the things that it promised, security, as in physical security, economic security, fight against corruption, these were the 3 planks of its manifesto, have all bombed. They've all failed, quite seriously. Insecurity, look, we're speaking this morning, the morning after supposedly up to 190 pupils were abducted in Kaduna, correct? And Kaduna state government has been forced to shut down 14 schools, most of them mission schools. And so the perception is created, rightly or wrongly, in the minds of people that this is an attack not merely on education, but on Christianity. Now, you can reach whatever conclusions you reach, but when you are closing down 14 mission schools, people are going to reach that conclusion, whether you like it or not. Okay? Now, and these are not the only kids that are in custody of kidnappers at the moment. And the government is doing what? They are deploying Sheikh Gumi as a commissioned plenipotentiary, arguing for the rights of bandits to abduct children, because this is really how I read him. And he's going about telling us that, he's doing all of what he's doing with the support of government. That disparages government.
Prof, you talked earlier about the methodological approach that, this government is seeking to, stifle the civil space. And we've moved into, the area of security and basically the state of the nation. With all of these things that we are constantly talking about on a daily basis, and seeing the current activities of the National Assembly, how do you think that this National Assembly, can take its place and do the needful, where the executive seem to be failing, that the National Assembly can bridge the gap and bring some succor to those that they are representing at the National Assembly?
I don't know whether I have an answer to your question. but let me try and respond. A response may not necessarily be an answer. I don't think the National Assembly is a substitute for the executive. I know that people tend to pad constituency budgets or constituency projects with all manner of things, and legislators like to take home goodies to their people, and I can understand that. You know, there's an element of the pork barrel in appropriations everywhere in the world, but the legislature is not a substitute for a capable executive. And so we've got to hold the executive responsible for its failures and failings in Nigeria. That does not mean that we cannot at the same time also hold the legislature and in fact the judiciary responsible for their respective failings. And the failings of our parliament, of our National Assembly, are immense. This particular session of the National Assembly has been abysmal. We are speaking as they are considering, they're even debating the idea of making Loretta Onochie a commissioner of IMN. You know, there are the roles of parliament are very clear under our constitution: appropriations, representation, consent, right, and oversight. Those are essentially the roles of parliament. And when you go to the consent role, for instance, Loretta Onochie is unfit to be a member of INEC, period, as a matter of the constitution and the law. We don't have to pussyfoot about that. If you want to, there are millions of other people from the South who could fit that bill, irrespective of where they come from. Why do you go for the least qualified, a non-Nigerian, for the most part, or at least a Nigerian who has renounced the Nigerian citizenship or acquired another citizenship under the constitution, is not qualified to be an INEC commissioner? That is a matter of the constitution, quite apart from her partisanship. But that's where we are. And the National Assembly wants to make her that. The National Assembly has failed in lots of other roles, including the role of making the place where they work viable, which is why it is leaking. It's never been this bad with the National Assembly. That's the point.
I think in addition to what Senami asked was their role, the democratic role in checks and balances, ensuring that the executive sits up to its responsibility in the event, as we're saying right now, that the executive appears to be sleeping on duty. But the National Assembly, too, instead of stepping up and being awake and being alert, seems to be kissing and hugging the executive at the same time. That also has deteriorated the state of governance in the country, isn't it?
Precisely, though. That's the point I am making. That part of the reason why that is so is that the executive is not facing any challenges in several places, from appropriations to the role of consent to its appointments. And so several of its appointments have gone through. Now, if the executive found itself in a situation where it actually had to justify some of the choices it makes to the National Assembly rigorously, it would sit up. But that's not happening. And so we have an executive that knows that whatever it goes to the National Assembly with, it will get. That is why that role of oversight is failing. Part of the reason why the role of oversight is failing is that the role of consent has failed.
All right. Prof, you talked about the issue of insecurity, especially as it has to do with Kaduna State. But let's talk about national insecurity as well, and the approach of the federal government in dealing with these issues. In specific terms, I want us to look at the issues of the issue surrounding the I don't know whether to call it, some persons have called it abduction and return, some have called it the extradition of Nnamdi Kanu, and the insecurity in the southeast vis-a-vis what is happening in the northwest and the northeast of the country, and the approach of the government. Specifically, the governor of Kaduna State was asked a question on the issue of banditry and the issue of the IPOB, and he tried to make a distinction which is not peculiar to him. Even the Minister of Information said the same thing when I interviewed him on this platform some time ago, that IPOB is a bigger threat to the Nigerian state than banditry is to the Nigerian people. Let me have your thoughts on this.
Well, first of all, let me say that I am not a spokesperson for the governor of Kaduna State or for anybody in government. So I cannot explain what they have said. They've articulated themselves for themselves. Having said that, I should also say that the issue of Nnamdi Kanu is before a court. And I generally try and avoid making myself, being myself a serial defendant these days before Nigerian courts, and having seen the kinds of things that can happen there, I generally try to avoid as much as possible being before another court. So I want to limit whatever I can say on an issue that is actively before a judicial forum. Clearly, insecurity, as I try to suggest, has metastasized in the country. Do I think that the distinction that they seek to draw, or that people have sought to draw, people like Nasir El-Rufai and Lai Mohammed have sought to draw between bandits and IPOB is sustainable? Yes, there is a sustainable distinction, but it's not the one that they seek to draw, in my view. The reality is that this government, by its actions and omissions, has suggested, if not declared, that in the fight between the people and lawlessness, it is on the side of lawlessness. Okay? So they found reason to declare IPOB in 2015 a terrorist organization. They found reason to declare the Islamic Movement of Nigeria a terrorist organization around the same time, 2015, 2016. And they are paying and protecting Sheikh Gumi to go around and advocate for bandits. And Nasir El-Rufai, who has shamelessly taken his son out of school, having publicly taken the son to school, to make the point that he is a reforming governor, has said that he took his son out of school because bandits threatened his son, the safety of his son in school. He has the luxury of being able to take his son out of school. Millions of Nigerians don't have that luxury. And part of the failing of this regime in Nigeria is that they don't have the empathy to say that properly or acknowledge it. There are parents this morning in Kaduna who are crying and praying on the grounds of the schools that their children went to yesterday. And these arrogant people who are in power in Nigeria don't understand that. Don't understand and will never know the pain of not being able to account for a child that you went to school, or having to receive the child that you sent to school back in a body bag, and not having your government acknowledge that. That is what I cannot understand. And, we are stuck in all of this navel gazing, and nobody is acknowledging the pain of the Nigerians who are going through all of this.
Professor, I want to quickly go back to the communique released by the Southern governors, and one of them also happens to, focus on some of the issues we have raised. But first of all, let me touch on one of the reports on the front pages of the dailies this morning, which was the fact that Boko Haram has a governor in Borno State, and they are collecting taxes.
That's not new. That's not new.
Okay.
Sorry. The idea that Boko Haram has been levying Nigerians for tax, fiscal measures, and exercising fiscal control, not just physical control, but fiscal control over parts of the territory of Nigeria is not new. Okay? That actually began before the current regime, before this current administration. By 2014, late 2014, 2015, that was happening. And after Nigeria deployed mercenaries between late 2014 and early 2015 to degrade that capability, it recovered some of the space in which that was happening. Now, as a result of things that I'm unwilling to discuss openly on national television, a lot of that space has been ceded back to Boko Haram, ISIS, and their franchises in the Northeast. And a considerable part of that territory for quite a while now has been under fiscal governance by elements of those insurgencies. That's the fact.
It will not be news to you to note that the governors resolved that if for any reason security institutions need to undertake an operation in any of the southern states, the chief security officer of the state must be duly informed, which is the governors. However, it goes on to say that the forum frowns at selective criminal administration of justice and resolve that arrests should be made within the ambit of the law and fundamental human rights. We don't need to, beg that issue. We do know that the southern governors are referring to the arrest of Nnamdi Kanu and Sunday Igboho in Ibadan. Now, with these two major issues, the governors are saying this, that why, most Nigerians rather are asking the question, why has it been easy for the security agencies to be able to deal with this issue with such passion, these two Nigerians with such, zeal, and have missed out in deploying the same zeal in dealing with the issues of bandits and terrorists across the country?
That's a question for Lai Mohammed, Femi Adesina, Garba Shehu to address. I lack the capacity to address that. But we always mind to find bullets, don't we, against students protesting in Southern Kaduna, the College of Education, or against NSAS protesters. And we managed to find helicopters to police a lot of places and helicopter gunships to attack communities in Olo, in Imo State. But somehow we cannot find helicopter gunships against bandits to fly over and attack bandits. And we can't find helicopter gunships to assault Boko Haram. And we can't do aerial reconnaissance to support ground troops in Marte or in Mongono. And that's a conundrum that sensible people cannot understand. Attack Sunday Igboho for all you care, and abduct whoever you want to abduct from wherever you want to abduct them. At the end of the day, the question still remains, and the people at the wrong end of developments in whether it's Niger State or Kebbi State or Sokoto State or Zamfara State or Kaduna State will continue to live in the conditions in which they live. And those people are not deceived. Now, but for me, two things more than any other thing are very clear from the communique of the Southern Governors Forum yesterday. Number one, APC is in tatters. The party cannot get even its own governors to subscribe to the policy direction of the president on the most important issues affecting the Nigerian state, the issues affecting security, safety and security of everybody in Nigeria. That's number one. Number two, Nigeria's federalism is in tatters. The governors are saying that Nigeria's federalism needs to be renegotiated, and in practice are renegotiating Nigeria's federalism with or without the consent of the federal government. The sad thing is that the president is not engaging strategically, he's not engaging politically, he's not engaging intellectually. He only engages where he believes that the fate of his regime is at stake. And so when he goes on television, he says that he defines the NSAS movement as those children who wanted to march here to remove me. He does not see any other thing about NSAS other than children who wanted to march to remove him. And that is really tragic for the country.
All right. Some of these things actually flow from the need for self-preservation, a lot of people have said. Those who have come up in defense of Sunday Igboho have said, for instance, that he became relevant when criminal herdsmen were moving into the different farms and forests in the southwest and attacking people. And he stood up and said that can happen. So you made a point there, Professor, on the lack of governance and the ungoverned spaces that have made individuals such as these to rise up. But within this is also the issues of self-determination, which they have advocated, whether it's Sunday Igboho or Nnamdi Kanu's IPOB. What is the context of this self-determination, which, of course, in international law, international treaty is well accepted? The right of people towards self-determination. But within the Nigerian context, the Constitution still says that Nigeria is indivisible and indissoluble. Does the Nigerian government, flowing from what the Nigerian Constitution say, now have the legal right to clamp down and criminalize any group that makes any attempt towards self-determination?
No, I think we've got to distinguish two different things, okay? One is the right to self-determination, or rights generally, and its legal status within Nigeria. And the other is how you advocate for rights, okay? Sometimes you can have a good case, but undermine it with poor advocacy skills or poor advocacy methods. Now, the right to self-determination is actually very well established in Nigerian law. Articles 19 and 20 of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights basically guarantee the right to self-determination in Nigeria. And the African Charter on Human and People's Rights is part of Nigerian law, adopted into Nigerian, it started off as a treaty, which the executive is authorized to make under Article 12 or Section 12 of the Constitution, and then legislated into Nigerian law under the African Charter Ratification and Enforcement Act of 1983. So it then became Chapter 10 of the Laws of Federation of 1990. Okay, so it is very well settled. This status is very well settled in Nigerian law, and the Supreme Court ruled in that direction in Ganifawa Emi's case on the status of the African Charter in Nigerian law. It's absolutely settled in Nigerian law. So the question of whether people can now advocate for self-determination is beyond the pale. If we want to do that, go and abrogate the African Charter first. And President Buhari himself has been heard to advocate the right to self-determination before the United Nations. He did that in his address in 2015 and I believe 2017, by the way. Okay? Now, it does not mean, however, that the only way or the first way or the best way to advocate for self-determination is by levying force or that kind of thing to begin with. It does not mean there are not other more peaceful ways or more comely ways to advocate for self-determination. To be fair, I have not heard that there are lots of other groups, not just these two, the two advocates that you're mentioning, who are advocating for self-determination in Nigeria. I think it is legitimate for people to argue a case for self-determination. And by the way, the argument for decentralization, for restructuring, is an argument for self-determination. Lots of people are doing that in Nigeria quite well. I've heard people like Nnamdi Kanu previously say that if you could have credible decentralization or restructuring, he'll be an irrelevant. And Sunday Igboho certainly began his advocacy with argument for both restructuring and for safety and security. Now, by the way, just to go back to your question, I think we've gone beyond the issue of ungoverned spaces in relation to insecurity, particularly in southern Nigeria. You know, look, Lagos is about 3,777 square kilometers. So if people are being killed in Lagos with over 20 million people, that is not a problem of ungoverned spaces. It's something else. Oh. Imo State is barely 5,000 and a bit square kilometers. If people are being killed in Imo State, it is not a problem of ungoverned spaces because every space in Imo State is occupied. Okay? That is the challenge here.